Hello everyone, I'm Women International Master Knarik and I'm using the chesswithknarik.com website to record this video. In this video, we're going to see a second part, a new position where we're using distant opposition in order to, for our advantage in an endgame. And if you want to understand more of what's happening in this pawn endgame, it's also better to see the part one of this video. So let's start here in this position. We have the black pieces. With the black pieces, we need to try to draw this game because, of course, winning is a bit difficult here because our opponent's king is much more active and has reached our side of the chessboard and is threatening to capture our pawns. Now, it's very important that we try to draw this, not allow white to capture our pawns. Now, um, let's see, what is white's threat? If we just allow white to play, what is white going to play? White's going to take the opposition, and in the right time, white's going to outflank our king. For example, here, if we keep, let's say, moving our king, we have to play king to g6, otherwise we're giving up the pawn on f6. What will white play here? White will, white will outflank our king here. That's outflanking, let's say, when our king moves away. And now there is no way that we can keep this pawn protected, the one on f6, and when white captures that, all of our pawns are going to fall and we are going to lose this game. So going back, if we just go back, then white's threat is just to take the opposition and then outflank and just win this game. But of course, white should also be careful. For example, if white outflanks in the wrong time, let's say here, and we're moving away and white outflanks by moving to f5, white can even lose this because here we can play king to f7 and white's in the zugzwang. White needs to push the pawn now. There's no other move that they can do. And we can just capture with any pawn and just promote without any trouble. And let's say white does still have moves, so it's not a stalemate. And we can just continue and win this game with a white king not being able to stop our pawn from promoting. So let's see. Let's go back to this position. So it's very important we don't allow white to take the opposition. How can we do that? So again, when we're discussing this position, let's say with students, they sometimes tell me, okay, we can take the opposition maybe by taking a diagonal opposition by playing king to f8. Or we can take the distant opposition, like we saw in the part one video. We can take the distant opposition by playing king to h6. Remember, distant opposition was when there are odd number of squares separating the two kings. So instead of having direct opposition with one square between the two kings, we can have 3 squares or 5 squares between the two kings. And that was also something good to take a distant opposition in pawn endgames. And so here we have two options to play: diagonal opposition or distant opposition. So let's see. If we take the diagonal opposition, okay, it's very important that we keep in mind that we should always be able to keep the opposition after even several moves that is played on the chessboard. But here, even after just one move that white plays, we won't be able to keep the opposition, because here if white plays just simply king to e6, how are we going to keep the opposition? Okay, we can definitely keep the opposition, but then we are not keeping our pawns. So here we have to not think about opposition, but just play king to g7 to keep our pawn on f6. And then we gave the opposition to white, and white's going to win this now no matter what. We're going to play king g6 to keep our pawn, and we said white is outflanking and winning this endgame. So going back, taking the diagonal opposition did not help in this position. So let's try our next option. Let's try the distant opposition. Are we going to be able to keep the opposition no matter what if we take the distant opposition? Let's see. If white tries to get closer, we keep taking the opposition. We keep taking the opposition. If white's trying to move away, we take distant opposition. White's staying away, we take distant opposition. White's moving away, we take distant opposition with 3 squares between the kings. And even further away, we can go even further away, and that's again distant opposition with 5 squares between the kings, and so on and so forth. We just make sure that every time white's playing, we do have a way to keep the opposition, and there we are. Just always make sure that you think ahead and you can keep the opposition. And if we can keep the opposition, there's no way that white can win our pawn on f6, and we will not lose this game, and we will keep the draw in this pawn endgame. Now, let's see one more pawn endgame where, okay, taking the opposition is important. In this position, we have the white pieces. Okay, in this case, we don't need to take distant opposition. We can just simply take direct opposition, and we can just play king to d5, take the opposition, and our opponent's king is moving away from the opposition. Of course, any move except king to e7 is going to allow our king to move to e6 and just capture the black pawns eventually. So definitely black's playing king to e7. And we said that it's very important that we decide when we are outflanking, when we're taking the opposition. And here we can just take the opposition here and wait for our opponent's king again to move. F7 is going to be the only move that the king can play here, because again, otherwise any other move we just go to f6 and just capture the black pawns. So that's king to f7, and here we can just outflank our opponent and be able to enter their position and win their pawn. When we outflank, doesn't matter what black is playing. Even if it's a move that, let's say, we can just play anything here and be able to get close to that black pawn and win. For example, even if we play a move like king to e7, it's true black's taking the opposition for a move, but we have much more space to move in. Here, for example, we can just play king to e6, and black won't be able to keep the opposition. Their own pawn is blocking their way. So black king must move away, and we can just win this pawn. Even if black is defending it, we can just wait, and when we wait, black king is going to move away, and we can just capture this pawn on g6, and after this pawn falls, we can just capture all the black pawns and win this game very easily.